Here we're following a group of retired superheroes that are investigating a murder of one of their own, and in doing so they begin to uncover details and facts about something much bigger at play. Hi, welcome back to my channel and my review of Watchmen from 2009. This is back again for my review series of Zack Snyder doing his third movie. I was actually so interested to go back and rewatch Watchmen because this is actually an adaptation of a comic book by Alan Moore. And whilst in lockdown, I was working a job with somebody who introduced me to V for Vendetta. And that was a film I'd never seen before that. And I've probably seen it now about 5 times since 2020. I loved that movie to death. It would be in the conversation now, probably my top 30 movies of all time. And the guy who wrote the comic book for that, Alan Moore, also did this for Watchmen. So I was really intrigued to go back and see this again. It's a movie that I saw on release and had a really good time with, but I don't know if I appreciated it anywhere as near as much as I did watching it again this time. I think it was because when this film was released, I was probably only about 16 or 17, and it was at a time where I just didn't really have the understanding or the interest in political issues as I do now. And I do think actually the story here is probably more relevant today than ever before, because, you know, it's impossible now to not come across news articles and stories about the threat of World War III, nuclear war, especially with everything going on in Russia and Ukraine. And the themes of you know, this war and in these situations run all throughout this movie and are being explored here. Like, if this were to happen, what are possible solutions? What should mankind do about these threats? And for me now, I just find that a fascinating theme to tackle in a movie. So I think I was always going to get much more out of it this time rewatching it, whereas back then it just wasn't the right time for it to resonate with me. And, you know, that's how it is with film, isn't it? You know, you go through your life and certain stories and themes will resonate with you just at different times of your life. So I'm definitely at a point now where Watchmen as a story was going to hold my interest a lot more. Something I love about Watchmen is how it begins as this very small scale story, just basically a murder mystery where you have this character of the comedian that we're introduced to, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and he's killed by an unknown character, and it's just about these old group of retired superheroes wondering whether this is a random attack or whether there's something a little bit more sinister going on here. And just how it begins as this murder mystery, it gets bigger and bigger to where at the end it's actually dealing with the fate of all humanity. I just love the way it kind of finds natural ways to ramp up this story and build more and more intrigue, new pieces added in. So it's kind of like a detective mystery story and then becomes more of like an epic towards the end. And I really loved that about Watchmen. It's quite unique. It's something that I don't feel like I've seen too many times before where they do it in that way. So that's something that I just found really engaging about the film. I think despite the fact as well that this is really a very dark story, you know, it's complex and has quite a somber tone to it, but even despite that, it's got a lot of fun as well. There's a lot of entertainment here, a lot of really dynamic characters. You know, you've got a great cast here that most people will really enjoy watching. You know, you've got Patrick Wilson, you've got Jackie Earle Haley, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, all these really talented actors that bring these characters to life and make it an enjoyable ride, because this, of course, is a very long movie. So I do like how they balance that tone throughout and make it so it's full of substance and really interesting dark themes, but it's also very watchable as well. It's not like one of those movies where you kind of don't really want to go back to after you've seen it once because it's just so dark and, you know, kind of got that depressing tone about it. But I do like that it's taking things a bit more seriously and doing something a little bit more complex than I think often a lot of more modern superhero films will do. I also found the conclusion, the wrap up of this story very interesting as well, and I think it's something that I didn't remember fully how this movie concluded originally when I saw it, or maybe I just didn't fully understand it, I'm not sure, but where they find out that one of their own, Veidt, is actually in on everything, and he's been the one orchestrating a number of these events to sort of smoke screen Dr. Manhattan, distract away whilst he sets up his bigger plans. And it's one of those ones that kind of brings up a lot of questions about morality into things where, you know, he wants to take away the threat of nuclear war by killing a lot of people and using Dr. Manhattan as the scapegoat for that to kind of form this common enemy, so we're at least not warring against each other. And even though morally it does sound horrific, and it does kind of make sense in another way when you think about it, and it's why what you kind of come to terms with why the Watchmen, or why the rest of the group, decide to accept this plan and basically keep it a secret. And I think the thing about it though is because this character of Veidt, the way he is, the way he delivers this plan, the way he tells the other characters how it's going to go down, something about it seems very sinister. So I think that's why it leaves a real bad taste with the group, the way they hear this. But despite that, in some instances you can understand how this kind of makes sense. It's kind of those moral questions that it's really talking about here in this movie as well. But despite having that understanding, you still have that real sympathy for the character of Rorschach, who just feels like morally it's not the right thing to do, even though to some extent, if you're just looking at pure numbers of what's going to save more people, what's going to, you know, take away some of the odds of a looming nuclear war, to some extent it's still a wrong decision to make, and you can definitely sympathise with that. And I think that's what makes the ending so sad and tragic of Rorschach. And I think it's especially the way the character is built up as well, because he's had such a rough life and he's stuck to his guns, he's stuck to his principles of living, and there's something just really likeable about this character. And the fact that at the end he chooses to walk away just because he believes it's wrong and he knows what's coming as a result of that. I just find that those last moments of him really pretty disturbing, to be honest. It's actually one of the main things I remembered about the film, is that really shocking final scene with him and Dr. Manhattan. And it's a really brutal, sad end for the character. And I think given that ending though, that's what makes him so amazing in hindsight as well. He's a really well developed character. I'm actually really interested to see the longer cuts of the film, because this was just a theatrical cut I'm reviewing, by the way, as it's the one I owned, but I've heard there's a number of longer cuts for this film which kind of dive into the characters a little bit more. So I'm hoping over the next few weeks I'm going to get a chance to check that out, because I'd really like to go back to this world again and get even more from it with some extra screen time with these characters. One of the more formulaic plots I think it uses is having this theme running also about whether there is a relevance to still having superheroes, whether they're needed or not. And this is, to be honest though, this is a theme that I like seeing in superhero movies. I think it is an interesting one when you have these people who are raised up almost like gods within a city or a town or whatever, where, you know, they have powers beyond the normal person and they're held to a certain level of responsibility. And sometimes this can actually cause more harm than good. I like it exploring those themes, but I would say that's something that's probably less original about the film. You know, we've seen this in the Dark Knight trilogy and other superhero films alike, where it's a pretty common theme and story that they like to tackle in these movies, but I do think it does work really well here as well. I think the only thing that I didn't completely love in this film is some of the story arc for Dr. Manhattan, and not that his story wasn't good or wasn't a necessary part of the movie. I just felt like when in the middle it goes to really sort of telling his life story, running his character through the events and where he was and how he got to where he is now, I find that it detracts a little bit from the main story that we're really starting to get engaged in. And again, the information they're presenting here is good, so you don't know. Again, like I've said before with movies, sometimes when you take things out, it can have other detrimental effects, where if a certain character isn't fleshed out, the whole thing doesn't work as well. And obviously when you consider how the story concludes, he's a very big, very important character, so you need to flesh this character out. I just couldn't help but feel like those scenes in the middle where they're developing him, and especially some of the scenes towards the end where he's out on Mars and he's kind of coming to terms with whether he cares about humanity and the things that he values and stuff. Even though those scenes are important, narratively speaking, I felt like sometimes it was detracting away from more of the more interesting and more engaging elements of the film. Overall though, what a fantastic movie. This is one of the best movies I've seen in the last few months, to be honest. I absolutely loved this. I'm already really interested to go back and see some of the longer cuts of the film, because I think this is a fascinating story and told brilliantly by Zack Snyder. Really brought this comic book to life. And again, so speaking about Alan Moore's stories here, there's something about them that just really works for me. This and V for Vendetta are movies that I'm going to be talking about and constantly recommending, because I just think they're really complex, interesting stories brought to life amazingly well by these directors. So yeah, Watchmen is a highly recommended watch from me. I'm sure a lot of Zack Snyder fans will have seen it, but if you haven't seen it for some time or felt more mixed about it, I definitely would say to go back and give this a rewatch, because it is absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5 rating. So if you've seen Zack Snyder's Watchmen, please do let me know in the comments what you thought of the film. Thanks a lot for watching my review, and I'll see you next time.